The night after the party, the mansion was unusually quiet. The janitor had finished his shift late, long after the guests had left. The music still echoed faintly in his mind, each note reminding him of what he had lost and what he had momentarily found again. As he placed the mop in the storage closet, he paused for a moment and looked back at the piano. The cover was closed now, but to him, it still looked alive, like it was waiting for him to come back. He sighed softly and walked out, his worn shoes making faint sounds on the marble floor. Meanwhile, the billionaire sat alone in his study, a glass of untouched wine by his side. He couldn't stop thinking about what had happened earlier that evening. The sound of the janitor's performance haunted him. He had seen many musicians perform in his life, but none had played with such raw emotion. It wasn't just talent, it was truth. That man had played like someone who had lived every note, every rise and fall in the music. The billionaire leaned back in his chair, feeling something unusual, something he rarely felt. Guilt. He had humiliated someone for entertainment, assuming he was above him just because of wealth. But that simple man had turned the room silent with pure heart. The billionaire couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to know more about him. The next morning, when the staff arrived, the janitor was already there, quietly sweeping near the back garden. He greeted everyone with a polite nod, as he always did. When the billionaire walked past, everyone straightened up. The janitor did too, keeping his eyes down. He didn't expect to be spoken to. But to his surprise, the billionaire stopped. "You," the billionaire said, his tone softer than before. "Come with me for a moment." The janitor hesitated but followed him through the long hallway into the study. It was a huge room with tall bookshelves, old paintings and sunlight pouring in from the windows. The billionaire gestured toward a chair. "Sit," he said. The janitor sat carefully, unsure what to expect. The billionaire took a deep breath. "Last night," he began, "you shocked everyone. You played like a professional. No better than a professional. Tell me something. Where did you learn to play like that?" The janitor looked at the floor. For a moment he didn't speak. Then quietly he said, "I used to play for a living, sir. Many years ago." The billionaire leaned forward. "You were a pianist?" "Yes," the janitor said. "Music was my life. I played in small theaters, taught children, and even composed my own pieces. But life has a way of changing things. I lost everything. My home, my family, my piano. When the bills piled up, I took the first job I could find. This one." He smiled faintly, his eyes heavy with memories. "I never thought I'd touch a piano again." The billionaire was quiet. For the first time, he didn't know what to say. He looked at the man sitting in front of him and realized how wrong he had been. "You know," he said slowly, "you made me look like a fool last night." The janitor's face turned pale. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to." The billionaire raised his hand.
"No," he said gently.
"Don't apologize. I deserved it." He stood up and walked to the window. "I've spent my whole life around people who pretend to be talented, who play for attention, not for love. But you reminded everyone what real passion sounds like." The janitor said nothing. He just listened. His hands rested on his knees, rough and tired from years of work. The billionaire turned back to him.
"Why didn't you ever try again?"
"I tried," the janitor said softly. "But doors don't open easily for people like me. Once you lose your place in that world, no one lets you back in. I stopped trying. Music became something I kept inside." He smiled faintly. "Until last night." The billionaire nodded slowly, understanding more than he expected to. "You have a gift," he said. "And it doesn't belong hidden in a janitor's closet." The janitor shook his head. "I'm grateful for this job. It keeps me going. I'm too old to start over." The billionaire looked at him with a mix of admiration and pity. "You're not too old to play. I want you to do something for me. There's a charity concert next month. It's for underprivileged children who can't afford music lessons. I want you to play there." The janitor blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. "Me?" "Yes," the billionaire said. You'll perform. I'll arrange everything." The janitor hesitated. The thought scared him. He hadn't performed in years, not in front of people who would truly listen. "Sir, I don't think I can. I don't even have proper clothes for something like that." The billionaire smiled faintly. "Don't worry about that. I'll take care of everything. All I ask is that you play like you did last night. Play with heart." The janitor looked down, his mind racing. Deep inside, he wanted to say yes, but fear held him back. The fear of failing again, of facing an audience after so many years. Still, something in the billionaire's voice felt genuine. He nodded slowly. "All right, sir. I'll try." "Good," the billionaire said, smiling for the first time that morning. "You'll do more than try." Over the next few weeks, things changed around the mansion. The billionaire asked for the janitor to have access to the piano whenever he wished. During breaks or late at night, the janitor would sit at the grand piano and practice quietly. Sometimes the staff stopped to listen from afar, enchanted by the sound. It wasn't just music, it was emotion, flowing freely through every note. The billionaire often stood at the door listening in silence. He didn't interrupt. For him, it was like rediscovering something lost. The sound of those melodies reminded him that life wasn't just about money and success. It was about feeling, about being human. As the charity concert day approached, the billionaire made sure everything was perfect. He bought a new suit for the janitor, simple yet elegant. He even arranged for a small orchestra to accompany him. But when he handed the janitor the suit, the man looked unsure. "I don't deserve this, sir," he said. "You deserve much more," the billionaire replied. "You just forgot who you are. Maybe it's time to remember." The day before the concert, the janitor stayed late, practicing one last time. The mansion was quiet, and the only sound was the piano filling the halls. As he played, memories returned. His daughter clapping her hands after every song, his wife smiling proudly from the kitchen doorway, the tiny apartment filled with love and laughter. Tears filled his eyes, but he kept playing. For the first time in years, he felt alive again. The billionaire walked in quietly, listening from a distance. When the music stopped, he said, "That's the sound of someone who was born to play." The janitor wiped his eyes quickly. "I just hope I don't disappoint tomorrow." "You won't," the billionaire said with confidence. "You're not just playing music, you're giving people hope." The janitor smiled faintly, his voice trembling. "Hope was all I had left for a long time. Maybe it's time I give some back." That night, as the lights dimmed in the mansion and everyone went home, the piano stood quietly once again. But this time, it wasn't just an expensive decoration in a rich man's house. It had become a bridge between two different worlds, one of wealth and one of struggle. And somewhere in between, two men had found something they both needed: understanding. Outside, the city lights shimmered and the janitor walked home under the stars, his heart lighter than it had been in years. Tomorrow would be a new beginning. For once, he wasn't just a janitor. He was a musician again. The evening was alive with laughter, music, and the soft clinking of glasses. Inside a grand mansion on the edge of the city, some of the most powerful people had gathered for a charity gala, hosted by a billionaire known for his wealth and pride. The lights shimmered from the golden chandeliers, reflecting on the polished marble floor. Everyone was dressed in designer suits and sparkling dresses. It was a world where money spoke louder than kindness, and appearances meant everything. At the far end of the hall stood a magnificent piano, a glossy black grand that looked like it belonged in a royal concert hall. Guests admired it, but no one dared to touch it. The billionaire loved to show off his possessions, and that piano was one of his favorites. He often bragged that it was once played by a world-famous musician. As the evening went on, the billionaire decided to entertain his guests with a challenge. He stood near the piano, holding a glass of wine, his voice booming across the room. "Who among you dares to play this piece?" he asked with a grin, showing everyone the sheet music of an incredibly difficult classical song. The melody was complex, filled with rapid notes and changing rhythms, the kind of music only a professional pianist could manage. Everyone laughed nervously. Some tried to make excuses, saying they hadn't practiced in years or didn't know how to play. Others just smiled awkwardly, not wanting to embarrass themselves in front of such a rich crowd. In the corner of the hall, a man quietly mopped the floor. He wore a simple blue uniform and kept his head down, focusing on his work. He was the janitor, someone most guests didn't even notice. He had been cleaning the mansion for months, always polite and quiet. His presence was like background noise, seen but ignored. But that night, something different caught his attention. As the billionaire spoke about the piano piece, the janitor stopped for a moment, listening. The name of the song made his heart beat faster. It was a piece he knew well, one that held deep meaning for him. Without realizing it, he smiled faintly, lost in thought. The billionaire, noticing the janitor's expression, turned toward him. His lips curved into a teasing smile. "Hey, what are you smiling about back there?" he said loudly, making the crowd turn to look. The janitor froze, unsure what to say. "Do you think you could play this?" The billionaire laughed, waving the sheet music in the air. The guests burst out laughing too. It was absurd to imagine a janitor sitting at a grand piano. The laughter echoed through the hall, sharp and cruel. The janitor lowered his eyes, gripping the mop handle tightly. But then with quiet courage he spoke. "I can try, sir," he said softly. For a moment the laughter stopped. Then the billionaire threw his head back and laughed even louder. "You play this?" he said mockingly. "Tell you what, if you can play this perfectly, I'll marry you myself." The crowd roared with laughter, clapping at his joke. The janitor didn't smile. He just looked at the piano, his eyes calm and steady. "May I?" he asked politely. The billionaire shrugged, still amused. "Sure, go ahead," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "Let's see what our man of many talents can do." People moved aside, forming a circle around the piano. Some pulled out their phones to record the moment, expecting a funny video to share later. The janitor put down his mop carefully, wiped his hands on his uniform, and slowly walked toward the piano. The sound of his footsteps on the marble floor echoed in the sudden silence. When he reached the piano, he didn't sit right away. He ran his fingers gently across the edge of the instrument, feeling the smooth surface. For a second, it was as if time stood still. The laughter, the whispers, the fancy clothes, and all of it faded away. In front of him was not just a piano, but a memory. He took a deep breath and sat down on the bench. The crowd snickered quietly. The billionaire crossed his arms, grinning, waiting for the show to begin. "Well," he said impatiently.
We're all waiting. The janitor placed his hands gently on the keys.
His fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from emotion. He had not touched a piano in years. Life had taken everything from him, his dreams, his home, his music. But at that moment, sitting under the bright lights, something inside him awakened. He closed his eyes and pressed the first key. The sound that came out was soft but pure, like the whisper of a forgotten memory. Then another note followed, and another. The melody began to take shape, gentle at first, then growing stronger. The janitor's hands started to move with confidence and grace, each note flowing naturally into the next. The laughter in the room faded. The guests leaned forward, their smiles disappearing as the music filled the air. The melody danced through the hall like a living thing, beautiful, deep, and full of emotion. The janitor played as if his soul was speaking through the keys. The billionaire's smirk vanished. He stared at the man playing his piano, unable to believe what he was hearing. The janitor's fingers moved faster, perfectly matching the rhythm of the impossible piece. It wasn't just skill, it was passion. Every sound told a story of struggle, loss, and hidden beauty. The guests stood silent, watching in awe. Some exchanged glances, realizing this was no ordinary performance. The man they had mocked only moments ago was revealing a side of himself no one expected. The janitor played with all his heart. He didn't think about the crowd or the laughter. He thought of the small apartment where he once taught his little girl to play. He thought of his wife who used to sit beside him and hum softly as he practiced. He thought of the day everything changed, the fire, the loss, the long nights when he could only dream of touching a piano again. As the final notes echoed in the hall, he lifted his hands from the keys and sat still. The room was completely silent. No one dared to move or speak. Even the billionaire, who had started the whole scene as a joke, looked lost for words. Then slowly the guests began to clap. At first it was soft and hesitant, then louder, until the hall was filled with thunderous applause. Some people even had tears in their eyes. The janitor stood up quietly, gave a small nod, and stepped back. The billionaire finally found his voice. He forced a laugh, trying to hide his shock. "Well, I didn't expect that," he said awkwardly. But his tone had changed. There was no mockery in it anymore, only surprise and a hint of respect. The janitor smiled faintly, bowing his head. "Thank you for letting me play, sir," he said simply. He turned to walk back to his mop, but the guests called out to him, clapping even louder. The billionaire just stood there, his glass still in hand, watching the man who had just turned his party into something unforgettable. For the first time that night, the billionaire didn't feel proud of his piano, his money, or his mansion. He felt small. He had mocked someone without knowing the story behind the uniform, and now he stood in silence, realizing how wrong he had been. The janitor quietly picked up his mop again and continued his work as if nothing had happened. But the air in the hall had changed. The laughter that once filled the room was replaced with quiet respect. And as he cleaned the floor, the faint echo of his music lingered in the hearts of everyone there, refusing to fade away. The morning of the charity concert arrived with bright skies and a sense of quiet excitement. Inside the concert hall, people moved about, setting up chairs, adjusting microphones, and tuning instruments. It was one of the most anticipated events in the city, attended by the wealthy, the famous, and those who loved music. The billionaire had made sure it was a grand affair with every detail perfectly arranged. But beneath all the glitter and luxury, there was one person sitting quietly in a corner, trying to calm his nerves: the janitor. He wore the new suit the billionaire had given him, neatly pressed and simple but elegant. His rough hands trembled slightly as he held the sheet music, though he didn't really need it. The piece he was going to play was already carved deep into his heart. Still, the fear of being on stage again after so many years made his chest tighten. It wasn't fear of the audience. It was fear of failing himself. The billionaire walked up to him, dressed sharply as always, but his expression was softer than usual. "You ready?" he asked. The janitor smiled nervously. "As ready as I'll ever be, sir." "You'll do great," the billionaire said with confidence. "Just remember, no one here knows what you've been through. But when you start playing, they'll feel it." The janitor nodded. "I'll try to play from the heart." "That's all that matters," the billionaire said with a reassuring pat on his shoulder. As the guests began arriving, cameras flashed and the sound of chatter filled the air. The charity banners glowed under the lights, displaying words about helping children discover their talents. The billionaire greeted his guests warmly, but every now and then his eyes would glance toward the stage where the janitor sat waiting. When the concert began, a few other musicians performed first. There were violinists, singers, and young pianists who played well, earning polite applause from the crowd. But everyone knew the highlight of the evening would be the mysterious pianist the billionaire had personally chosen. Whispers filled the hall about who he might be. Some guessed he was a retired maestro or a hidden talent discovered by chance. Finally, the host walked up to the microphone and announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, our next performer is someone whose story reminds us that talent has no title and passion knows no limits. Please welcome our special guest." The lights dimmed slightly. The janitor took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. For a moment, the entire hall was silent. People looked at him confused. Some whispered to each other, wondering why a man who looked like a working-class cleaner was walking toward the piano. But the janitor didn't hear them. He only saw the piano. It shone under the stage lights, and as he approached it, everything else faded away. He sat down slowly, adjusted the bench, and closed his eyes. The noise of the crowd disappeared. All he could hear was the steady rhythm of his own heartbeat. Then he began to play. The first notes were soft and gentle, flowing like water over smooth stones. The sound carried through the hall, delicate and emotional. People who had been whispering fell silent. The janitor's fingers moved across the keys with grace and precision, not with effort, but with love. It was as if the piano itself recognized his touch, responding to every movement of his hands. As the music grew, so did the emotion behind it. He played with all the memories inside him, the joy of his younger days, the laughter of his family, the pain of losing everything, and the long years of silence. Every chord spoke of his journey, of resilience and quiet strength. The billionaire stood at the side of the stage, watching in awe. He had seen great performers before, but this was different. There was something in the janitor's music that reached people in a way words never could. Even those who didn't understand classical music felt something stir inside them. The janitor's hands moved faster now, his body swaying slightly as he played. The orchestra behind him joined in, following his lead. The harmony between the piano and the instruments created a sound so powerful that it filled every corner of the hall. Some people closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Others leaned forward, unable to look away. By the time the final notes came, the entire room was silent again. The janitor lifted his hands from the keys and let the last sound fade into the air. For a moment, no one moved. Then the applause came, loud, thunderous, and heartfelt. The entire audience rose to their feet, clapping and cheering. Some shouted for an encore. Others wiped tears from their eyes. The janitor stood, overwhelmed. He looked around the room, not quite believing what was happening. He gave a small bow, his eyes glistening. Then he saw the billionaire standing in the corner with his hands together, clapping harder than anyone else. After the performance, the janitor stepped backstage trying to steady his breathing. People came up to him, thanking him, praising him, asking about his background. He answered politely but humbly. For him, the applause wasn't about fame. It was about feeling alive again. A young boy approached him, holding a small notebook. "Sir," the boy said shyly, "I want to learn piano like you one day." The janitor smiled, his voice gentle. "You can, son. Just never stop believing in what you love. That's all it takes." The boy nodded eagerly, his eyes shining. A few moments later, the billionaire came backstage. His expression was filled with pride and emotion. "You did it," he said quietly. "You changed this night forever." The janitor smiled softly. "I just played what was in my heart." "You did more than that," the billionaire said. "You reminded everyone here what real art is." He paused for a moment, then added, "I want you to keep playing. Not just for events like this, but for something bigger. Maybe we can start a program to teach children music. You could lead it." The janitor blinked, taken aback. "Me? Teach again?" "Yes," the billionaire said. "You have something no one else here does, a story. A heart that speaks through music. People will listen." The janitor's voice trembled slightly. "I don't know if I can, sir. It's been a long time since I taught anyone." The billionaire smiled. "Then it's time to start again. Let's give others the chance you never had." The janitor looked down at his hands, the same hands that had cleaned floors and carried heavy buckets for years. Now those hands had brought hope to a room full of strangers. Maybe, he thought, this was his purpose all along. He looked up and nodded. "If I can help even one child find what I lost, then I'll do it." The billionaire extended his hand. "Then it's a deal." The two men shook hands, a silent understanding passing between them. Two people from completely different worlds, united by something greater than wealth or status, music and humanity. Later that night, as the janitor walked home, the city lights seemed brighter than usual. He carried no awards, no trophies, but his heart was full. For the first time in years, he felt like he belonged somewhere again. The applause still echoed in his ears, but what stayed with him most were the faces in the crowd, the smiles and the tears. He stopped for a moment on a quiet street, looking up at the sky. "Thank you," he whispered, as if speaking to the people he had lost and the dreams he had buried long ago. Back at the mansion, the billionaire sat in his office, thinking about everything that had happened. He realized that the janitor had not only changed the lives of those who heard him play, but had also changed his own. For years, the billionaire had surrounded himself with luxury, but felt empty inside. Now he felt something real and gratitude. He poured himself a drink but didn't touch it. Instead, he opened his phone and sent a message to his assistant. "Start drafting a plan for a music foundation. Let's call it the Harmony Project," he smiled to himself. It wasn't just about charity anymore. It was about giving back something meaningful. That night, both men slept peacefully. The janitor dreamed of music, not as a memory, but as a living part of his soul again. And the billionaire dreamed of doing something good with his wealth, something that would last longer than his buildings or his fame. The world had changed for both of them in ways neither could have imagined. All it took was one song, one moment of truth to remind them that every person, no matter their place in life, carries a story worth hearing. The weeks after the concert were filled with excitement and change. The billionaire's charity concert had become the talk of the city. Newspapers and online articles praised the event, not just for its luxury or the donations raised, but for the story that stole everyone's heart, the story of a humble janitor whose music had moved the crowd to tears. People wanted to know who he was, where he came from, and how someone so ordinary could play with such soul. But the janitor avoided attention. He didn't like interviews or cameras. He just wanted to keep playing quietly, the way he always had. The billionaire, however, had different plans. He wanted to make something lasting out of what happened. True to his word, he began working on an idea called the Harmony Project, a program to help underprivileged children learn music. He believed that if one man's hidden talent could change so many hearts, there must be countless others waiting for a chance, and he wanted the janitor to lead it. At first, the janitor hesitated. He had never seen himself as a leader. He was just someone who loved music, not someone who ran programs or gave speeches. But the billionaire reassured him. "You don't need to be a manager," he said. "You just need to be yourself. Teach them the way you learned, through heart, not perfection." So after a few weeks of planning, the project began. A small music center was opened in an old building the billionaire owned. It wasn't fancy, but it was full of life. Old pianos were repaired, violins donated, and classrooms painted bright colors. Children from all kinds of backgrounds came in, their faces full of curiosity and hope. The janitor, now known as the teacher among the kids, spent his days surrounded by laughter and music. He showed them how to place their fingers gently on the keys, how to feel the rhythm instead of counting every note. He often told them, "Music is like breathing. You don't think about it, you just let it flow." The children adored him. He was patient, kind, and humble, always encouraging them even when they made mistakes. One afternoon, as he was helping a little girl practice her scales, the billionaire walked in quietly. He watched from the doorway, smiling. The room was filled with soft piano notes and laughter. The billionaire couldn't remember the last time he had felt such peace in his own buildings. There was no business talk, no competition, just joy. When the lesson ended, he approached the janitor. "You've built something beautiful here," he said. The janitor smiled, wiping his hands on a cloth. "We built it, sir. You gave them a chance, I just show them what's possible." The billionaire nodded. "Do you know what I've realized? For years I thought success was about how much I owned. But now I think it's about how much I can give." The janitor looked at him kindly. "It's never too late to learn that lesson." The billionaire laughed softly. "You're teaching more than music, my friend. You're teaching life." Over time, the project grew. More children joined and local musicians volunteered to help. The story of the janitor turned teacher continued to spread. People came to visit the center, not because it was famous, but because it felt different, warm, welcoming, and full of hope. Despite all the attention, the janitor stayed humble. He still lived in his small apartment, still walked to work every morning. But inside, he felt a happiness he hadn't known for years. He was doing what he loved, and he was giving back to the world that had once forgotten him. One rainy evening, as he was locking up the music center, he noticed a young boy standing outside in the rain. The boy looked cold and nervous, holding a small bag. The janitor quickly invited him in. "Hey, you'll get sick out there," he said gently. "Come inside." The boy hesitated, then stepped in slowly. His clothes were worn and his shoes were soaked. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I just wanted to see the place. I heard this is where people can learn to play." The janitor smiled warmly. "You heard right. What do you want to play?" The boy looked down. "The piano," he whispered. "My mom used to play before she got sick. We don't have one at home anymore." The janitor felt a tug in his heart. He remembered his own daughter, the one he had lost so long ago. He saw the same spark in this boy's eyes, the same hunger to express something through music. "Well," he said softly, "you came to the right place. How about we start tomorrow?" The boy nodded, his face lighting up with a small smile. "Really? You'd teach me?" "Of course," the janitor said. "Music is for everyone. Now go home and get some rest. We'll make some magic tomorrow." The boy thanked him and ran off into the rain. The janitor stood at the door, watching him disappear down the street, a quiet warmth filling his chest. He didn't know it yet, but that meeting would change both of their lives. The next day, the boy returned early, even before the other children arrived. He sat eagerly at the piano, waiting. The janitor smiled as he entered and began the first lesson. The boy learned quickly, his small fingers stumbling at first but improving with every note. He played with passion, just like the janitor once had. Weeks passed, and the bond between the two grew strong. The boy began staying late after class, asking questions about music, about life, about dreams, about... The janitor told him stories not about fame or money, but about never giving up, no matter how hard life got. One evening, as they finished a song, the boy asked, "Sir, do you ever miss playing on big stages?" The janitor smiled thoughtfully. "Sometimes. But I think this is my stage now. Every time one of you learns something new, it feels like the best performance I could ever give." The boy nodded, understanding more than his age should have allowed. Meanwhile, the billionaire continued supporting the project, visiting often to check on its progress. He had become a quieter man, more reflective. Watching the children play made him think of his own childhood, of the dreams he had forgotten along the way. He started spending less time at parties and more time helping others. People noticed the change in him. He wasn't just a rich man anymore. He was someone who cared. One day he called the janitor into his office at the music center. "I've been thinking," he said, "we should open another branch of the Harmony Project in another city. There are too many children out there who need what we're doing here." The janitor nodded slowly. "That's a beautiful idea, but it won't be easy." The billionaire smiled. "Nothing good ever is." He paused for a moment, then added, "And I want you to help lead it. You've become the heart of this whole thing." The janitor looked surprised. "Me? Sir, I'm not a businessman. I just teach music." "You teach more than music," the billionaire said firmly. "You teach hope. People follow that." The janitor thought about it for a long moment, then smiled softly. "All right. If it means more children get to feel what music can do, I'm in." The billionaire extended his hand and the janitor shook it, just like they had the night of the concert. It felt like the beginning of something even greater. As months went by, the project expanded. More centers opened, more children found their voices, and the janitor's name became a symbol of quiet strength and kindness. But through it all, he never changed. He still arrived early every morning, still greeted every child with the same smile, and still found peace in the sound of the piano. Sometimes, late at night when the center was empty, he would sit alone at the piano and play. Not for an audience, not for applause, but for himself, for the memories, for the people he had lost, and for the simple joy of music. And in those moments he realized something. His journey had come full circle. The man who once cleaned the floors of a mansion now filled entire halls with music, not just through his own hands, but through the hands of hundreds of children who had learned from him. The billionaire often said, "You gave me back my humanity." But the janitor knew the truth. They had saved each other in different ways. One through music, the other through kindness. And together, they had built something that would outlive them both. A legacy of hope, melody, and the belief that every soul has a song worth hearing. The following months were some of the most fulfilling times of the janitor's life. The Harmony Project had spread to nearby cities, touching the lives of countless children who had never imagined they could hold an instrument, let alone play one. Everywhere he went, he was met with smiles, laughter, and the sound of music. The once quiet janitor who used to mop floors late at night had become a symbol of hope. But deep inside, he still felt the same, humble, grounded, and grateful. One evening, as he sat alone in the small music room, the billionaire walked in quietly. The two men had grown close, their friendship built on respect and shared purpose. The billionaire pulled up a chair and sat beside him. "You know," the billionaire said softly, "I've been thinking about how far we've come. I still remember the night at that party when I challenged you to play. I thought it would be a joke. I had no idea that moment would change both of our lives." The janitor smiled gently. "Life has its strange ways of teaching lessons," he said. "You gave me a stage, but you also gave me a chance to heal." The billionaire nodded slowly, looking thoughtful. "And you gave me a reason to feel human again." He paused, then added, "I want to do something more. Something that lasts beyond us both." "What do you mean?" the janitor asked. "I want to build a music academy," the billionaire said. "A real one. A place where children from any background can come and learn for free. No sponsors, no investors, no fancy donors. Just pure art, passion, and hope. And I want you to lead it." The janitor was stunned. "Me? Lead an academy?" "Sir, that's too much," the billionaire chuckled. "You've said that every time I've asked you to take a step forward. And every time you've proven that you're more than capable. The janitor looked down at his hands, rough from years of work. "I don't even have a degree in music," he said quietly. "You have something better," the billionaire replied. "Heart, and that's what these kids need most." For a moment they sat in silence, the sound of rain tapping against the windows. The janitor finally nodded. "If it helps more children find their path, then I'll do it." The billionaire smiled. Then it settled. Months later, construction began on the new academy. It was a beautiful building, open, full of light, and surrounded by gardens. When it finally opened, it wasn't the billionaire's name written on the main sign. It was the janitor's, not out of pride, but as a symbol of what could happen when humility meets opportunity. The opening ceremony drew people from all walks of life: teachers, students, musicians, and even journalists. The billionaire gave a short speech, thanking everyone for their support. But when it was the janitor's turn to speak, the crowd fell completely silent. He stood at the podium, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I used to believe that dreams belonged to the lucky few," he began. "The ones born into comfort with all the chances in the world. But life showed me that music, kindness, and hard work don't belong to anyone. They belong to everyone who believes." He paused, glancing at the children sitting in the front row. "There was a time I cleaned the floors of buildings like this one. I thought my story had ended there. But music reminded me that no one's story ends until they stop trying. So to every child here, remember this. Even if the world doesn't see your light, keep shining. Someday someone will notice." When he finished, the entire room erupted in applause. Many people had tears in their eyes. Even the billionaire, who rarely showed emotion in public, stood up and clapped until his hands hurt. Over the next few years, the academy flourished. Talented young musicians emerged, many of whom went on to perform in national competitions and orchestras. But what made the academy special wasn't fame or awards. It was the sense of belonging. Every child, whether rich or poor, felt valued and seen. The janitor, now known as the academy's heart, never changed. He still preferred sitting quietly in the classrooms, guiding a small group of children through their lessons. He refused to take credit for the success, always saying, "The music did it, not me." One afternoon, as he was finishing a lesson, he saw a familiar face at the door, the young boy who had once stood outside the music center in the rain. Now older and taller, the boy was holding a letter. "Sir," the boy said with a bright smile, "I got accepted into the National Music Conservatory. I wanted to tell you first." The janitor's eyes softened with pride. "That's wonderful news." "You earned it." The boy nodded eagerly. "I couldn't have done it without you. You showed me what music really means." The janitor smiled, his voice gentle. "No, my boy. You just listened to your heart. I only helped you find the rhythm." The boy laughed, and for a moment, the janitor felt like he was looking at his younger self, full of dreams, ready to face the world. After the boy left, the janitor sat by the piano, lost in thought. He began to play softly, letting the notes fill the room. Every melody carried a memory of struggle, loss, hope, and rebirth. He wasn't just playing for himself anymore. He was playing for every soul that had ever felt unseen. Meanwhile, the billionaire's health began to decline. Years of long hours and stress had taken their toll. He spent more time at home, but he often asked for updates about the academy. Whenever he could, he visited quietly, sitting at the back of the hall to listen to the children play. One evening, as the janitor finished teaching, he found the billionaire sitting alone by the piano. "You should be resting," the janitor said softly. The billionaire smiled weakly. "I couldn't stay away. I wanted to hear them play one more time." The janitor sat beside him. "They've all come so far. You made this possible." The billionaire shook his head. "No, my friend, you did. I just provided the walls. You filled them with music." They sat in silence for a while, the soft hum of children practicing in the distance. Finally, the billionaire turned to him and said, "Promise me one thing. No matter what happens, keep this place alive. Keep the music going." The janitor nodded solemnly. "I promise." A few weeks later, the billionaire passed away peacefully in his sleep. The news hit everyone hard. The academy held a small memorial in his honor, where the children played the billionaire's favorite piece. The janitor led the performance, his hands trembling slightly as he played. The melody was filled with gratitude, sorrow, and love. After the performance, he stood before the children and said softly, "He gave us the means to dream. Now it's our duty to keep his dream alive." The years that followed were bittersweet. The janitor missed his friend deeply, but the academy continued to thrive. New generations of children came through its doors, each leaving their mark. The janitor grew older, but he never stopped teaching. His voice became softer, his steps slower, but his spirit remained strong. One evening, as the sun set over the academy's gardens, he walked through the halls, listening to the faint echoes of piano keys and laughter. He paused by the photo wall, where a picture of him and the billionaire hung side by side, two unlikely friends whose bond had changed countless lives. He smiled quietly and whispered, "We did it." Then he turned, walked into the practice room, and sat at the piano once more. His fingers rested on the keys, trembling slightly but steady enough to play. As he began, the familiar warmth filled the air. Every note carried the story of a janitor who dared to dream and a billionaire who dared to believe. And even though time would eventually move on, their song would never fade. It lived in the hearts of every child who learned to play, every soul touched by their kindness, and every melody that rose from that humble academy. For as long as the music played, their story would live on, a quiet reminder that greatness can come from the most unexpected places, and that the smallest acts of faith can echo for generations. Years passed like pages turning in a quiet book. The academy had grown into something even greater than anyone had imagined. The building that once started with a few instruments and a handful of children now stood as a symbol of inspiration for the entire country. Children from faraway towns traveled to learn there. Some came with big dreams, others with nothing but curiosity and hope. Yet each one left with something beautiful, a love for music and a belief that they mattered. The janitor, now an old man, watched it all with quiet pride. His hair had turned silver, his movements slower, but his eyes still carried the same warmth they always had. Every morning he arrived before anyone else, unlocking the doors, sweeping the floors, and sitting by the piano for a few minutes before the students came in. Those few moments alone with the piano were his favorite. He would play softly, letting his fingers wander over the keys as sunlight spilled into the room. It was his way of talking to life, wordlessly, gently. The academy's walls were filled with photographs and students performing, teachers smiling, and of course the picture of him and the billionaire standing side by side. Visitors often stopped to look at that photo. It reminded them that the story of the academy began not with wealth, but with humility, kindness, and music. One day, a group of former students visited the academy. They had all gone on to become musicians, teachers, and performers. They gathered in the main hall where the old man was sitting quietly tuning a piano. When he saw them, his face lit up with joy. "You all came back," he said, his voice soft but full of emotion. "We wanted to thank you." One of them said, "You changed our lives. We wouldn't be here without you." He smiled gently. "No, my children. You changed your own lives. I only showed you the door." They laughed softly, but their eyes glistened with emotion. One of them placed a small bouquet of flowers on the piano. "For everything you've done," she said. The old man touched the flowers lightly and nodded. "Thank you. The music you all make now, that's the real gift." They spent the afternoon sharing stories, playing music together, and reminiscing. For the old man, it was one of the happiest days in years. Each song they played carried memories, laughter, hard lessons, and moments of triumph. As the evening came, the students left one by one, promising to return soon. The old man sat alone in the empty hall, surrounded by the echoes of their music. The sound lingered like a warm breeze wrapping around him. He looked up at the photo on the wall, the one with the billionaire, and whispered, "We did well, didn't we?" That night he stayed later than usual. The moonlight spilled through the windows, lighting up the piano. He played a melody that had no name, gentle, full of peace. It was a song that spoke of gratitude, friendship, and fulfillment. For him, music had always been more than sound. It was memory. It was life. The next morning, when the first students arrived, they found the piano still open and a sheet of music resting on top. On it, in his neat handwriting, were the words, "Keep the music alive." The janitor had passed peacefully in his chair, a calm smile on his face. The news spread quickly. The children, teachers, and people from all over the city came to the academy that day. There was sadness, yes, but also deep gratitude. Everyone knew that he had left behind something far more lasting than himself, a legacy of kindness, compassion, and melody. The academy held a small memorial in the main hall, No one wore black. Instead, they dressed in colors he loved, simple, bright, and full of life. The children played his favorite pieces, their small hands trembling slightly but steady enough to fill the hall with emotion. Their music echoed through the building, reaching every corner, every photograph, every memory. The boy who had once stood in the rain years ago, now a grown man and a well-known pianist, stepped forward to speak. His voice trembled as he began. He was more than a teacher, he said. He was proof that one act of kindness can change a life. He didn't just teach us how to play music. He taught us how to live, how to keep believing even when everything feels impossible. He paused, looking around the hall. He showed us that greatness doesn't come from fame or money. It comes from the heart. And if you listen closely, you'll hear him in every note we play. When the speech ended, the room fell silent except for the soft sound of the piano. The same melody the old man had played the night before filled the air once more, as if his spirit lingered there, guiding their hands. After the memorial, the academy decided to rename itself in his honor. The sign outside was changed to read, "The Harmony Academy, founded by a dreamer." Beneath it was a quote from him engraved in stone. "Music is for everyone who has a heart that listens." The academy continued to grow in the years that followed. New teachers joined, new students learned, and the sound of music never stopped. The spirit of the janitor lived on in every smile, every song, and every child who discovered their love for melody. The Billionaire's Foundation continued to fund the project, honoring the promise the old man had made long ago. The boy who had once been his student became the new director of the academy, guiding it with the same warmth and humility. He often told the children stories about the janitor, about how he once cleaned floors, about how he played the piano with all his heart, and about how his kindness had changed everything. "Remember," he would tell them, "you don't have to be rich or powerful to make a difference. Sometimes the ones who shine the brightest are the ones who start in the dark." Every year on the anniversary of the academy's founding, the students and teachers held a small concert in the garden. They called it the Night of Gratitude. There were no tickets, no fancy decorations, just music under the stars. Families gathered, children laughed, and the air was filled with joy. And every time the first note was played, someone would look up at the sky and whisper, "Thank you." One evening, many years later, the boy, now an older man himself, sat by the same piano where his teacher had spent so many mornings. He placed his hand on the keys and began to play the melody that had started it all. As he played, memories came rushing back, the laughter, the lessons, the warmth of a man who had once believed in him when no one else did. When the last note faded, he smiled softly and whispered, "We kept the music alive." Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying the faint sound of music into the night, as if the old man's spirit was still there, listening, smiling, and proud. And so, the story that began with a single act of mockery turned into one of the most beautiful tales of redemption, friendship, and hope. A billionaire learned compassion, a janitor found purpose, and together they created something eternal. Years may pass, buildings may crumble, but the melody they left behind, the melody of kindness and belief, will forever play in the hearts of those who dare to dream. Because in the end, music isn't just sound. It's love, it's memory, it's life, and as long as there is someone willing to play, their story will never truly end.